Hi everyone, Bonnie here, pouring some wisdom into your day. Part 2 of Angela Duckworth's grit review takeaway that I am doing. Last video, I talked about the internal environment and how greedy people have sort of 4 commonalities and how those can be cultivated in ourselves. And I self-identified sort of where I was and where, 60% gritty. And this video is the last section of her book, and she talks about the external factors. There's 3 chapters, and she talks about, and this one really excited me when I saw the title of it, Parenting for Grit. So if you don't know, I have an almost 3-year-old son, and especially because I don't identify as a gritty person, and I think that it's a valuable thing, I am actively trying to help him become a grittier person. And I'm doing it just with, whatever I already know. And it was interesting reading the chapter to see, where am I going right? What could I do better? All of those kinds of things. So the first one is Parenting for Grit. The second one, I've got the book right here, is The Playing Fields of Grit. What outside parents? What about people who grew up to become gritty but didn't have gritty parents that did these things? Where are they getting it from? And then the last one was a culture of grit. How can you help create that and use culture to help you become a grittier person? So I'm going to kind of touch on those and see again where I fall on those things. So Parenting for Grit. She uses 2 examples of gritty people and talks to their parents. And she goes kind of surface level and then digs deeper for both of them. And on one of them, the parents of a swimmer, she uses the narrative and the question she asks and the response to showcase a stereotypical authoritative dictator style parent. My way or the highway, rub some dirt in it. This is the way to go. And then the other family is the very stereotypical laissez-faire, hippy-dippy, let's love and explore and kind of do whatever you want. And she does that very much on purpose because they're kind of 2 extreme options of styles of parenting. And she wants to identify, does one of these styles equal gritty kids? And then, of course, she goes in and she interviews the parents and she, gets really deep into it. And she identifies that both of them have 2 things in common. They are great at loving support of their kids, and they are great at setting and holding boundaries and encouraging their kids to do difficult things. And those are the things that are what cultivate grittiness in someone. Having this caring, supportive environment where you are free to make mistakes, but you're held accountable to your actions and your choices, and the expectations of how you're going to conduct yourself are really clear and the standards are high. And that makes the most sense to me. It's always duality. It's always a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Is it nature or nurture? It's obviously both. It's always both, and we should just believe that and proceed accordingly. What I loved about it, especially because that's kind of what I already intuitively thought, that's what I'm already trying to practice. My partner and I, are actively letting our son do hard things and giving him words of encouragement that he can do it and that we're not going to help when he can do it, while still allowing him to ask for help when he needs it and being there when he's asking for help. And what is the level of help? We're not swooping in and doing it for him. We are giving him some guidance on how he can do it himself. And so a couple of examples of that. We're going to gymnastics and it's just, free play, kind of do whatever you want on the equipment, explore, your physical space and the limits of your body and all those kinds of things. And one of the things that Arthur likes to do is climb up the ladder. And he gets to a part where he gets scared. And then he says, Mom, I can't do it. I need help. I can't do it. And instead of me just sort of picking him up and helping him down, saying, there you go, buddy, no problem, what I do first is I verify that he wants help and reassures him that, hey, he got up there and he can do it. And then I give him some instructions on where to put his hands and his feet so that he can do it and follow it and feel it and see that he actually can get back down himself. So that's something that I have strategically, intentionally done. Is it the best way? I don't know. It's the best way that I know with the current information that I have, and I feel very good about my approach in that regard. If I learn more, I will adapt and do better. That's sort of one example. Where I fail, because it's good to know that as well. Where am I falling down on this? Especially it happens when we're in a hurry. So Arthur can, put on his own boots and put on his own shoes. It just takes him a while. And if I am not on top of my game and I'm late, then I do it for him because we're late and it is what it is. But that chapter was exciting for me to read. I felt very validated in some of my choices. And I could also reflect back and see where my parents have made some of the same choices for me and how that shaped me into the person that I am. So that one was really good. Then the next chapter, she talks about, well, what happens if you don't have those kinds of parents? What about if you have parents that didn't give you boundaries at all or that didn't support you at all? Can you still develop grit? Where does it come from if you do? And she identified that those people that didn't have the parents still had an adult somewhere, and not even necessarily an adult, an older mentor that at the right time in the right place gave some encouragement and some expectations that allowed them to internalize it and pursue grit. Oh, I've got something at the door. Where can this come from? I was very pleased to see that the result of the chapter, the sort of main takeaway, was extracurricular activities, particularly for kids in high school for 2 years or more. That there's no official research that shows, double blind, we've assigned these kids to do ballet for 2 years and these kids, sorry, you don't get to do anything because we're going to experiment with you and see if you become a gritty person. There are some ethics, as you can imagine, in conducting that study. And so it's hard to tease out, do extracurricular activities develop gritty kids, or do already gritty kids choose to go into extracurricular activities, right? We can't tease that out because we can't run that experiment. But it's probably both, right? Like we've talked about before, it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. And so if you want to encourage grit, develop that interest, especially when they're young, to put them into various activities that they might, spark some joy and some interest, and encourage commitment. And the reason that she identifies extracurriculars, specifically sports, the arts, I guess those are kind of the two main genres, but she talks about, sports teams, ballet, and like karate, very, things like that. Why are those specific? And it's because the coaches are adults or older mentors that are not your parents. And so there's a different element of learning and listening in that environment. And the environment itself is designed to fail, get up, and get better. So there are expectations and boundaries and encouragement built into those activities that are also fun. And that was key for her. You can go to school and work hard and have boundaries and expectations, but kids don't identify that as fun. And you can play with your friends and, have fun texting them and going on TikTok. And kids describe that as being fun, but there aren't high expectations and standards. You don't have to work hard. And extracurricular activities are the only place where those come together. And what happens during our brain development in adolescence is when you can pair hard work with fun, those connections are super plastic and they wire together, and you develop this understanding that working hard is going to bring you joy and fulfillment. And the pathways are made in those connections in adolescence. She talks about how she there's a gentleman named Jeffrey Canada, and I was really excited when I read this because I also follow Tom Bilyeu's podcast, and he talks about Jeffrey Canada all the time. So I was like, oh, there's a connection. Hey, this is cool. I'm part of it, even though I'm obviously not, because I don't know Angela Duckworth or Tom Bilyeu. I'm just a random person on the internet. But Jeffrey Canada, what he has done is he it's called a KIPP school, and it's an acronym, and now I don't remember what the acronym stands for, so I apologize. But he sets up a school in the same building, randomly assigns kids into his version of the school so that there's a control group, and they set very high expectations and standards of conduct for their kids. And what was interesting in this chapter, which I've never heard Tom Bilyeu talk about, is even though the funding doesn't necessarily correlate to make this make sense, extracurriculars are mandatory for their program, because he came to the same conclusion about what happens during the extracurricular activities is really important for the neural development of the kids in terms of long-term success. So that was really, really interesting. And when they break it down, kids that just jump from activity to activity and don't endure it for more than a year, like if they don't do something 2 years in a row and kind of get some accomplishment in it, so they win something, or they get a promotion in student government, or they shoot, they like, and I'm not a basketball person, but they get like a high number of free throws in a basketball game or something like that. Those experiences are what create these connections that develop gritty people. So for me, looking back into my experience, like I said in the other video, I was a dancer for a long time. I started at 5. I stopped when I was 16 or 17. I took 1 year, like I didn't dance in grade 12, came back to it in university, and then came back to it as an adult and started teaching it. So that's a long time. But not just that. I was in student government starting in grade 4 all the way to grade 12. And like I did sustain a lot of things. So and in band, I was in band and choir. I'm really grateful that my parents were able to facilitate that for me, particularly dance. Dance is a very financially challenging activity, but I was also in soccer, which is, everyone can be in soccer. It's very well subsidized for families. And I lost track of where I was. Oh, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that my parents were able to do that for me, and that it's so valuable, because that's something that I thought was really valuable as well. And it makes me sad that not everyone gets the chance to participate in team sports or piano or violin or, whatever activity that they want to, because I knew intuitively that there was something really important that kids were missing. And now I have a better understanding of what that is and why it's so important. And then the last chapter was a culture of grit. And so somebody's delivering something for me. I will go get it in a second. If you want to become a grittier person, you can use peer and social pressure. So if you get yourself into a space where everyone around you are hard workers and the values are the same, you're going to morph and conform and shift into that person. So you can kind of hijack peer pressure in a really positive way. And she highlights some various sports teams, the Seattle Seahawks, which is football. I don't know. They're in Seattle. Highlights they have a culture of grit. And so she goes and interviews them and sees kind of where that comes from. as well as JP Morgan Chase, the bank, the CEO apparently really has this culture of excellence and grit. And so it's really neat to see the different examples across various aspects of life, sort of traditional where you think grit would be, sports, Olympian athletes, for example, but then also, the restaurateur and writers and that kind of stuff. All right, so that's what I have for you. Where do I fit on the culture of grit? I am highly susceptible to it, and I should definitely do a better job of surrounding myself with gritty people, 100%. I knew that before I read the chapter, and now, yeah, okay, you're right, Angela Duckworth. That is what I need to do. Thank you. So I'm probably 70%, a little bit better than the internal grit, but still sort of on the positive grit scale. So I might do another video talking a little bit more about my own grit experience, or I might move on to another book that I'm reading, or we'll kind of see where it goes. So if you have carried on with me with this journey, this is the third book that I've been talking about in my learning, sharing it with you. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and have a magical day.